Welcome to Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can contact the show on Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn at iPropertyRadio, or indeed email the show at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host for today is myself, Carol Tallon. Now, as we know, September is always a busy month of industry events, and while we might have thought this September would be a little bit different due to the pandemic, actually what we saw was that most events actually did proceed and they moved online. And, you know, there was a wonderful theme to these events. And one of the really key themes that we saw coming through this year was about the industry giving back. You know, so we saw it through Sean Mulroy and the Ballymore team out planting trees. Indeed, the team and his family, generations of family. And speaking of another third generation business, McKeon Group have launched a particularly interesting community initiative, and we'll be talking about that later in the show. But our first guest today actually has a very interesting event coming up this weekend. So welcome to the show, Frank Monahan, Director of Architecture at the Edge. Frank, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Carol. Thanks for inviting me onto your wonderful podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm delighted. Frank, I came across Architecture at the Edge last year, and I came across it too late to attend, but actually I was following a lot of the activity online, and the reason I couldn't attend was because it was over in the west of Ireland and I just wasn't able to get there. However, the lineup looked amazing. But this year you've actually transitioned to take what would seem to be an event that would have to be done in situ. You've actually transitioned it online.
Yeah, that's right, Carol. And normally we would have a events. You know, the whole idea is that people get an opportunity to visit and have access to buildings that they normally wouldn't have an opportunity to do that kind of thing. And we would hold a symposium at the National University of Ireland in Galway. We've had a relationship with the university since we've been going now. This is our fourth year of the festival, but unfortunately this year that just isn't possible to go ahead for obvious reasons. But we did feel it was important to remain relevant and to maintain the sort of activities that we do. And given that we are a festival that's all about public engagement with architecture and about the built environment and how that the quality of our lives is contingent on the quality of the built environment, that now is a very important time to continue that conversation. And everyone's moved online to Zoom, and that's the way we're going this year. So
yeah, no, I mean, look, it's a great idea. You're absolutely right when you say that it has never been more important to have a conversation about the built environment, because actually one of the things that I am hearing too much about is that what's happening at the moment is simply, an acceleration of trends that were already in play. And, I was guilty of using that term myself, but, I read a really interesting piece by a Proptech startup here in Ireland, Standard Access, and they were talking about how actually it's quite detrimental to keep saying that the impact of the pandemic on the built environment is simply an acceleration of existing trends, because actually it's not accurate, but it's also not helpful, because actually every event that happens that has historical significance shapes our built environment and changes it and leaves a lasting impact. So we saw that, when we looked at maybe the impact of previous infections over the past century on the environment in certain cities. So it would be naive of us to think that this pandemic is not going to have a lasting impact. But how are you approaching that in the festival?
It's quite an interesting one. I mean, I think there certainly is an acceleration to some extent of certain, requirements in and around the public realm in particular. Now, we don't have the best weather in this country, but I don't think that's going to get in the way, there is a need there, and you also have this big shift to remote working, and we read and we hear about the property prices increasing throughout the outside of the capital. People want a better quality of life, and they feel that they can do that part of the time from home. I think there's also an opportunity to kind of see that revitalization of the towns and villages as sort of hubs for different types of activities as well. But I think we've always been shaping our built environment. Even before the pandemic, there was a requirement to build in flexibility to things that we do. We talk about repurposing or readapting old spaces for new uses. What they call meanwhile spaces, using things in the shorter term. But there certainly has to be, I think, built into whatever it is that has been created or planned or developed, some sort of flexibility and a way of adapting to change as and when it happens.
Yeah, just this morning, the Real Estate Alliance Property Group released figures, data from the last quarter. And I understand, this is a little bit maybe premature to be calling a trend. But, the figures of the last quarter definitely revealed demand for housing is on the up, but that people are looking to move out of the city and return to their native counties. So that really feeds into I suppose the revitalisation of the regions and more rural areas. And you touched there on the remote working and the hub and spoke model of maybe remote working or working from an office that isn't your company's headquarters as such. And I think that there's an opportunity here that maybe we haven't seen in past years.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly some people have always made that choice, and I think with the rollout of having good broadband is the key thing, whether you have a teenager in the family or not. To make that actually a realistic sort of way of living, you actually absolutely have to have that. It's fundamental. But there's also I don't think the office is completely dead. I think we do need our interactions are very important. We talk about a sense of community that you have in a village, and to some extent these kind of hubs and that potentially are beginning to spring up around the country, or even within cities. I mean, you look at somewhere like Singapore, and or even London, and sometimes it's just a series of different villages. And if you actually sort of translate that sort of idea to a small country like ours, it's not impossible to imagine setting up these remote working stations where people can kind of come and come into the office, we'll say, for a few days a week, and then still have that balance in their lives where they can work from home. And I suppose productivity is quite important. I think that's kind of dipped a little bit. But it's no wonder we're all finding it quite difficult in these times. But there are opportunities to shape things, so in a different way.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose that sort of feeds into sort of transport and sort of planning, I suppose, as well.
And I saw that you actually have somebody from the Western Development Commission on the lineup, and I just think that's really interesting because there was actually a representative from the Western Development Commission speaking at the Irish Planning Conference earlier this month. And she was actually speaking about how she's based in one county, works in another, and has been effectively working from home while working full time, working maybe from the office 2 days a week and working from home 3 days a week since about 2003. So, actually we've been doing this in Ireland, particularly outside of the capital and outside of maybe the Leinster region for quite a while. I don't know, is there an element that we just needed a few buzzwords connected to it for us to see it as a trend? But actually, it's really interesting now to learn from the experiences of people who've actually been doing this, for the last almost 2 decades, but that maybe we just weren't aware of. Frank, I was just going through the lineup there, and I see that actually not everything is online. You are going to have a number of art installations. So will you talk us through maybe some of the offline elements of the festival this weekend?
Well, what we wanted to do was maintain. We are a festival. It is public facing, and I suppose it's not just for a professional audience. It's really about communicating to the general public that a good quality built environment is relevant to them and can impact their own social, their well-being, their socio-economic sort of situation and that kind of thing. So making it sort of fun, I suppose, is important. So we've got some film screens that are happening on the exteriors of buildings in Sea Point in Galway and in Galway's West End. And one of these projects is by a Galway-based photographer called Emilia Jeffermova, who had taken in March and April a series of self-isolation portraits. So that period of time when we were all kind of cocooning or locked up, within our 2 kilometers or whatever it was, she travelled around within Galway city centre, within that radius, and took photographs of people on their doorsteps. And it was quite evocative kind of series of images. And I suppose it is all about community at the end of the day. And that's a lovely exhibition. So that'll be projected onto the walls, like I say. Then we also did an open call that, we do theme the festival every year.
Mm-hmm. And what's the theme for 2020?
The theme this year is boundaries. And we actually came up with that before there was these restrictions in place, but when, you remember it was 2 kilometers and then it was 5 kilometers and then it was the county. We might be going back to that.
That's very relevant for the time we're in now, because suddenly boundaries have become very important.
Yeah. So, whether that's national boundaries or you're talking about the Irish border and Brexit, it's so relevant in so many different ways. Or we do have an event which is all about procurement and how, are we affording the opportunity to the talents of, small and medium enterprise kind of architectural practices to actually get into the bigger kind of, schemes. And I think, maybe one of the ways out of this situation we're in is going to be a lot more of state investment in infrastructure and development and housing. We'll see where that goes. I mean, it was a big hot topic before the election, of course.
Yeah, the issue of public procurement is one that has really come under the spotlight. Maybe more at the earlier part of the year before COVID kind of took the focus off it. And there was a community of architects came together. We Can Build Better, and they've been promoting this on social media and actually championing the idea that actually, like you mentioned there, that, sometimes smaller practices can be shut out. So you might just explain that a little bit more for us. Yeah.
So they're actually, we've actually got that's one of our featured talks within the online program. And it'll feature Michael Pike from GKMB, and Louise Cotter from Car Cotter Nassim down in Cork, and you've got Orla Hegarty from UCD, who's quite vocal about these things.
Yeah, and in fact, she actually published, or there was a piece from her published just today, and it was a particularly interesting one, actually. She's talking about actually how COVID-19, the pandemic, could actually be an opportunity to prioritise decent building, or building decent homes. So I think that we've actually interviewed Orla Hegarty here on the show previously, and she's very outspoken in, definitely. She doesn't have the same maybe burdens or limitations that some of the commercial enterprise might have, coming at it from an academic point of view, that, there's definitely a conversation that needs to happen where we try to correct some of the issues, without getting overly idealistic in a way that is unachievable or unattainable. We definitely need to use this period of chaos to take advantage of it to actually stop things that weren't working properly and make changes to help the built environment work better. And, it's been fairly strong source of contention that, during the crash and the early stages of the recovery, that was the right time to create some change. And maybe the change didn't happen the way many people in the industry, or perhaps commentating on the industry, would have liked to see it happen. And it feels like the pandemic is a little bit of a do-over. This is the time where we say we know more, we have more data, we can do this better. But is there a political will to support that? I don't know.
I think this sort of fundamentally at the heart of this question of I suppose boundaries and barriers. What's in the way? I mean, I think Orla, in her position as assistant professor at the School of Architecture and Planning in UCD, would be aware of the sort of legislations through modules that she'd be teaching young architects in. And for their Part 3 examination, and management practice and law. And I think she sort of sees the unwieldy sort of system that we've got set up, the bureaucracy, that might exist there that actually, gets in the way of this. I mean, we often hear about, perhaps sometimes the fingers pointed at communities, and people say, well, there's NIMBYism, or not my backyard, but sometimes it's sort of there is an awful lot of talent out there that's just not being harnessed. And I think that sort of connects to that idea of if people can remote work, then why can't maybe smaller practices might find it's a better environment to set up in these sort of more Western or rural sort of rare areas as well.
Yeah.
So I think in highlighting some of the issues that how the state procures its buildings, then maybe there's opportunities then to raise the quality of life for everybody.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that I certainly see through the procurement process, and not just from an architecture or building point of view, but actually, there's such a weighted significance given to experience. And it is almost immaterial whether that experience is good or bad. And we've seen that through the choice of contractors on very large commercial or large state and infrastructure projects. So actually, we've almost ridiculously weighted experience in the public sector against which cancels out any innovation, any new entries or new entrants into the procurement process, and it's completely contrary to any idea of innovation and improvement. So they go hand in hand. That if you've been there for a long time, you stay there. And if you've never done it, then you can't get in, and it's just a ridiculous system when you step back and look at it in its simplest form. So actually the We Build Better campaign is such an important one. In fact, I think it's important from an architecture point of view, but actually I believe in every industry, they would probably have the same issues with public procurement. So the issue is really with public procurement.
Yeah, it is. And, you could probably find this in so many other ways, and I think throughout the different events within the festival too, it is about taking a different approach. And I suppose that's why what we're about, I suppose, and makes it a little bit different from the other kind of events that might be happening in relation to the built environment.
Yeah.
But you have the Sandy Road development is a big thing here in Galway, which was commissioned by the Land Development Agency, and we have John Moore will be taking part in one of the talks as well. But that was in partnership with the RIAI and Galway City Council working together to look at to unlock the potential for a massive brownfield site on the edge of the city. But it's a very complex kind of arrangement, and there's a lot of leftover spaces that are, I suppose, unconnected to the city, all over the country. And this sort of, there's potential here to kind of look at a different way of doing things, I suppose.
Yeah.
And,
I think you've maybe epitomized that with the big debate. And I have to disclose a vested interest here because I will be chairing this debate, which I'm very much looking forward to, because we're going to have a panel actually debate the ongoing fitness for purpose of Project 2040 post COVID-19. And I think that's such an important conversation to have, because we've touched on so many elements over the past number of months here on the show. So you've mentioned there that John Moran, chair of the Land Development Agency, and the Land Development Agency is certainly putting out its markers to be one of the most transformative agencies in recent times for this industry. Now, obviously, we wait to see can it deliver on that, but it's certainly setting out those markers to become this. So we'll have John Moran together with Elaine Brick of ACOM and Tomás Chacón, is it?
That's correct, yeah.
The CEO of the Western Development Commission, and indeed John Concannon, who is Vice President of NUI Galway. And so that's a really esteemed multidisciplinary panel coming together here to discuss something. So we'll be able to talk about it from the public and the societal right through to the transport and indeed kind of the bigger picture through the LDA and the Western Development Commission. And it's really important, by the way, to say that this isn't just about Galway. We're taking County Mayo as well. But that's, so that's one particular event. Like I said, I'm disclosing a vested interest here, but it's one particular event that I'm really looking forward to. Frank, another thing that struck me, when I heard you speaking about the launch of this year's events, you spoke about how, you really want to empower people to shape their built environment and to remove boundaries to participation. And, public consultation is something that was seen for much too long in Ireland for the built environment as a tick box exercise. And there are many organisations, including our own Place Engage, that are trying to overcome this. But I thought you described it very eloquently, when you spoke about to live in the west of Ireland is to be surrounded by boundaries. So whether it's hedgerows, stone walls, the coastline of the sea and the edge of our town and settlement, look around and you'll see the architectural signals that define people past and present and their place in society and distribution of property. And I just thought that really encompasses everything right down to our, maybe the psychology around property and our need to protect what's within our own defined boundaries. So I thought, it was such an interesting way to start the conversation when we do want the community, we want people to use their voice to help shape the built environment, because it is one of the founding tenets of placemaking that the community knows best. You definitely want to bring these experts in to answer questions. But we definitely need for the community to raise the right questions as well. And the only way we can do that is by making it accessible. It isn't just people who have, a background in planning or in architecture or that have design skills, that really every voice comes together to shape this. So that's why I think the concept of boundaries is not just a particularly important one, but also a particularly relevant and timely one. So before we finish up, I just want, maybe you might just talk us through some of the highlights that you don't want people to miss this weekend.
Well, for me on that, Carol, it would have to be the Rural Office for Architecture with Neil Maxwell. There's going to be a series of talks. The first one which is taking place this Friday evening at 5:30, where he's invited Fiona and Matt and Owen Griffiths and Tom Keeley to take part, and it's a discussion about removing the barriers to participation for people. I mean, we talked about underutilized resources, whether it's our architects, our brownfield sites, but of course the greatest resource we have are people, and the pandemic has highlighted sort of, I suppose, some inequalities in society. And we could, probably warrant another podcast just to talk about that.
Absolutely.
But the people we all do know that the people most affected are those ones that they're sort of have less opportunities. Let's say,
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
And we've hinged a lot on tourism as well in this country and that kind of thing. So it's about, but that aside, the series with Niall Maxwell is about removing barriers to participation, and actually about bringing people to, we had a tradition in this country of metal for a long time, and I'm sure it still exists.
Yes.
And it's just about people helping each other and coming together to kind of, it might have been the harvest, or it could have been building a house. And I think, the bungalow bit sort of type of thing, it actually is almost part of that. And people have written about that kind of thing before. But it is a very strong thing that we have here is how people can come together and support each other and help each other, and to use whatever it is within their locality to build something, whether that's a physical building, or if it's much more something about an organization or a group that sort of can help fulfill the needs of that community. And I suppose we're beginning to see, I think, a movement where people are sort of, we talk, when I mentioned the utilization of the talent that we have of architects, I think, architects can offer solutions to a lot of things. It's, we are meant to be problem solvers, and you find ways of assembling something from, constituent parts, I suppose, and putting it together at a certain location. But within that process, it's all about the program and the need for what it, who's it serving. And so I would really hope that through the series of talks throughout the autumn, that we can sort of explore how we can remove some of these barriers and how we can sort of start to build it together, I suppose.
Okay.
To make things a bit better for everybody.
Very good. Thanks, Frank. Yeah. And just one final thing here. I see that you have something on the air we breathe, and that's particularly relevant. Over the past week, where we saw the EPA launched its latest report on the air quality data from 2019, and so this seems like a particularly relevant. So just talk to us about that particular event.
This came through the open call to artists and architects to respond to the theme of boundaries. And this particular duo, Sam Vardy and Paul McCluskey, they have a collective called A Place of Their Own. And they are exploring the idea that the air we breathe might suggest a sort of a public realm. And that sort of, you can't really control the public realm in lots of ways. People do what they want and walk where they want in lots of ways. And the air does that. It's not defined by boundaries. It's very hard to describe the air we breathe. It's something we take for granted, but of course it's absolutely vital. And we all know that now. We're wearing face masks. So they're working with scientists that are based doing research from the Macehead, air pollution studies, that take place there. It's Dr. Claire Noon and Liz Coleman. And for a long time, they've been monitoring the air quality from Macehead. And actually, apparently, it's a very important station for all of Europe. And sort of, if you're looking for vital signs of the condition of the air of the entire planet, Macehead is actually quite an important location, and it's right here in Galway. So the artists are working with the scientists to create this installation. It's an art installation, and it's going to be situated at Grattan Beach in the city over the weekend. And it's just to draw attention to, I suppose, or draw a correlation between that we hear about us all being in this together, but we all do share the air. But there's sort of ideas that everything's one big, the planet's like one big organism. We're all interconnected. We all depend on each other, and the air that we breathe is this very same as that. You can't define it. It's hard to describe qualities to it, but it's something that's co-produced. It's actually a product of the environment that we live in. So I suppose that's what the artists are trying to sort of say with this, and it's an art science kind of connection. I think we need to see more of these things.
Absolutely, and
these sort of collaborations.
And look, we've only touched on, a small number of the great events that are scheduled to take place this weekend from the 2nd to the 5th of October. So the full lineup is available on architectureattheedge.com.
That's right, yeah, on the website.
Super. Frank, first of all, thank you so much for from the industry for putting this together. I look forward to participating and I look forward to enjoying many of the events. And I would encourage anybody to take a look at the website, architectureattheedge.com. And now the fact that location is no problem, you can sign up and follow online. That was Frank Monahan, Director of Architecture at the Edge. My thanks again for joining us today. We need to take a quick break now.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email the show at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Now, so following on from our earlier theme of the industry giving back, third generation business McKeon Group has launched an interesting community initiative to celebrate 70 years in the industry. And here to tell us about it is Director at McKeon Group and Judge in the Ashburn Heroes Initiative is Cliona Molloy, Director of McKeon Group. Cliona, well, let's start by congratulating all at McKeon Group. 70 years in the industry, that's a huge achievement.
Absolutely, it is. As you say, we're third generation. The company was originally founded in 1950 by my grandfather. So we're thrilled to have reached this milestone.
Yeah, third generation. You know, that's a heavy mantle to have. So you're a director alongside your brother, Tomás McKeon. So again, it's still very much a family-run business. But look, talk to us a little bit about the work that McKeon Group is involved in.
Absolutely. So we are construction main contractors and we are building services contractors. So we have mechanical, electrical and technology divisions as well. We work across a range of industries, including commercial, education, hospitality, healthcare. And I suppose where our niche is or where we really excel is carrying out projects and operating in complex, live and occupied environments, where we need to be innovative in our solutions for the clients.
Okay. And so, well, I suppose that you mentioned there in terms of complex projects and live environments. Did you have many essential projects ongoing during the lockdown over the last number of months?
We actually did have 2 contracts ongoing during that time. One was a contract where we are preparing properties for housing agencies for our clients. So that was deemed as essential. Obviously, something that's needed in Ireland at the moment. Absolutely. And another one was for a medical manufacturing plant.
Okay, so and obviously most of those projects or those type of projects would be considered essential at the moment. Actually, have you seen a ramping up of activity in that area?
Yes, we have. It's been a strange time and we had several projects, put on hold and that kind of thing. But we have in the last month or two been given go ahead on some of those, which is encouraging to see. So hopefully that will continue.
Okay, very good. And by the way, how many people are engaged there through McKeon Group?
We have approximately 80 direct employees at the moment, and then obviously we have a range of approved subcontractors that have worked with us for many years.
Okay, and you might have seen the news over the last few days, that construction in Ireland is contracting over the past month and a half. What has been your experience on the ground?
Yes, look, like I was saying, it's what we're really seeing is delays on decisions. That seems to be the biggest thing, and across the industry. And again, while some are moving forward, with I suppose what's being termed as the second wave, it's hard to know without a crystal ball exactly how that progress. But look, we've had to change, we've had to adapt, and all we can do is, keep following the new practices we've put in place, and keep, I suppose, being able to prove that the industry can continue while following new procedures and that type of thing.
Oh, very good. And actually, speaking of new procedures, I'm familiar with an app that your company actually developed and made available for the entire industry. So actually, you might just, for anybody who isn't familiar with it, you might just actually speak to people about that app to streamline compliance processes.
Yeah, so this came about during lockdown, really, when we sat down to think about, how we would get back to work. And one of the factors we had to consider was in terms of obviously social distancing, but also our procedures for induction. For any staff and subcontractors coming on site. And the big issue there is, handling pens and paper and checking safe pass cards and that type of thing. So we thought about, how could we bring that online? And initially we were talking about, filling out a form in advance, but you still have to be able to access that form. And what happens if people go from one site and, a week later they have to go to a different site? How do you access that? So we came up with what we've termed the Good to Go app, which has been hugely successful. And it allows, it's a link. It takes, 3 minutes for someone to fill out, and they're including all of their details that they usually would for induction. So their safe pass, their the new CIF induction that has to be carried out for everybody. Very and when they're obviously then the screening questionnaires for COVID. And when they get to site, then the site manager or our COVID-19 compliance officer can simply, open the app, check their name. They'll be green if they've been approved for a site, red if not. And you can even take photos, upload certs, etc., without the need for handling of pens and paper and that kind of thing.
Very good. Cliona, over the last number of months on the show here, we've been talking about, the massive efforts and the amazing work that the industry has done to get back on site safely, to integrate all of these new safety procedures and protocols into their everyday, whether it was by phased working or shift working or splitting into teams and a whole manner of solutions. But now we're a few months on from that, how has that whole process been for McKeon Group? Is it still something that's extremely burdensome, or has it almost been adopted? I'm loath to use the term the new normal, but has it almost been adopted into the way things are done now?
To a certain extent it has. I mean, back again, before we went back to work, we were putting, these new plans in place and thinking, okay, these all look good on paper, but how is it actually going to work on site? But I think what has really helped is, the attitude of people on site. They have all bought into this. They're all very wary themselves and aware that these procedures need to be followed. So it has become part of the norm at this stage. However, you do need to keep reinforcing. It's the little things that can. You just need to check yourself all the time, sharing of tools, that kind of thing. It's a constant reinforcement for cleaning, sanitizing, that type of thing.
Look, you're absolutely right in terms of not getting complacent. To be honest, it's something that, outside of the industry, it's something we're seeing in our everyday life. And, the interesting thing, I've seen that children seem to be really good at this. They just seem to be able to adopt to the new way of doing things, whether it's through school or sporting activities or whatever it is they're doing. And, there is this case of not wanting to get complacent about it, but making things to normalise some of these behaviours a little bit. And I think you really, hit the nail on the head there in terms of attitude. The industry really bought into this. There was no element of thinking that this was tokenism in any way. People knew how important it was, having seen the sites shut down and having been furloughed or having their wages subsidized. Really, this is something that nobody was taking for granted, so definitely there was massive buy-in. And I think maybe the construction industry, from a safety point of view, perhaps even had a bit of an advantage here, because safety is something that's been taken so seriously over the past, decades, that maybe there was a bit of a natural advantage here that we saw.
That's completely true. And I mean, things like, regular toolbox talks there, they're naturally took place in any case. So now you're adapting those toolbox talks to, reinforce social distancing, all that kind of thing. But yes, it very much did help that safety was such a focus in any case in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, as a third generation business, does that, when we hit like a really unprecedented level of chaos like we did in 2020, do you think being a third generation business gives you kind of some natural advantages in terms of resiliency, or is it more burdensome? Like, is that legacy maybe heavy at times like this?
It's probably a bit of both, to be quite honest. So there is always that feeling of, oh God, we're the third generation. Let's not us lose it at this point.
I can imagine.
So there's that, but there is, you're correct there on picking out that term resilience. And I mean, Tomas and I would have, seen the business go through ups and downs over the years. We'd have heard Dad speaking about difficulties he came across, and what we really learned from him, I suppose, was that there's always something can be done. If you put your mind to it, you can adapt. And I suppose perhaps that is something that is unique or helped out by the fact that we are a family business. There's that feeling that, we'll sit down, we'll go through the options, we'll find a way through.
Do you know, that reminds me of a book I read last year by Marie Forleo, and it's Everything is Figure-Outable. And it was like, for a made-up word, it was like, that absolutely makes so much sense. And that's where the whole idea, I think, over the last maybe decade or a decade and a half, the term innovation has become a little bit synonymous with technology. And actually, they really are very different things. An innovative mindset will figure out anything, and they would have figured out anything in the last century, without the technology that we identify with today. So I think mindset is everything. And that's clearly something that's there in the ethos of McKeon Group.
Oh, yes. I mean, we often talk about, going back to 1950, and my grandfather, he was innovative and I suppose an entrepreneur before the term even became fashionable, in that, he was initially, he set up a joinery shop. He then moved into construction, and when there was a shortage in the industry, he went and started building blocks by hand. And again, with Dad, he never stopped thinking of ways to improve the business, and it's something that we've even focused on. I suppose we're putting the word innovation on it now, which mightn't have been used so much back then, but we're even we've engaged a lot in teaching the tools of innovation to our staff, and the whole idea of design thinking and trying things quickly, failing quickly if need be, but trying it and moving on. And if it works, then you develop it from that point forward.
Yeah, giving a team permission to fail is probably one of the most empowering things you can do to take steps forward, and it's something that hasn't really been, it definitely hasn't been a feature of the construction industry. And I'm going to say that it hasn't been a feature of Irish business. I don't think that we have a great attitude towards failure, whereas if we look at other jurisdictions, we can see, like, particularly say on the funding or VC side of things, outside of Ireland and perhaps even outside of Europe, if we look to North America, we can see that actually having a bit of a legacy of failure, if you can show you've learned from those failures, counts as experience. Whereas in Ireland, maybe counts you out, so we haven't been good at facilitating failure and acknowledging the learning that comes from that and seeing it, seeing the inherent benefits that come from that, and it's something that it's great to hear you talking about, because it's, obviously when you're talking about a low margin business that has high safety concerns, then obviously failure is a relative term, but there has to be room for innovation. There has to be room to try things and see how it goes. But we started the interview by remarking that McKeon Group, 70 years in the industry, which is a huge achievement, but you found a really novel way to mark this 70th. You didn't throw a big fancy black tie bash. Obviously, we couldn't do that in COVID times anyway. But you chose a really different way to celebrate it. So, talk to us about Ashburn Heroes.
Yeah. So, as you say, look, at the start of this year, we had, several plans for, to mark the celebration of 70 years. And of course, like many other things, COVID put a stop to a lot of those. But one of the things we had talked about was how we could engage with local community, with local charities, and really give back to the community which we've, developed in. So we talked about it, what was the best way to engage, who would we engage with? And it was actually one of the team, our senior QS, Joe Kirk, came up with the idea of what about recognising those people in the community who are just doing some fantastic work for no reward, no recognition, just because they want to help others out. So we all, I think, jumped on the idea straight away and thought this would be a great initiative. So what we're really doing is asking people we've teamed up with the Ashburn Lions Club, and what we're asking people to do is think about those in their community that they consider heroes. And that does not need to be, as the slogan at the minute, all heroes don't wear capes. Could be anyone from your neighbour who's calling in on somebody who's isolated, who is taking the time to check on them, who's, helping out with supermarket deliveries. It could be frontline staff. It could be that person in the community who just will always, if something needs to be done, will, put their mind to it and gather a team behind them and just carry out what's necessary.
Yeah. So, the initiative just seems really timely after the few months that we've been through, on a personal, professional, on a domestic and national level as well. It just seems like a really timely way to step back and acknowledge the people within our communities who genuinely do so much, not because they have to, just because that's what they want to do to contribute to their community.
Exactly. And I mean, COVID this period has really shown us that. I mean, I know the message is social distancing, but we've all, I think, seen examples of communities actually really coming together. I often think of that Irish phrase, Ar Scá Chéile Bhar na Dina, and it could not be truer than over this period.
You'll have to translate. My Irish, I'm afraid, is very rusty.
Well, I suppose it's the idea that no man is an island, that we all need each other. And we survive by helping each other out. It's literally translated as we all live in each other's shadows.
Oh, that's a lovely expression. I haven't heard that before.
Very good.
No, that's a lovely one. Okay, so just for people who want to nominate, so I understand now the nomination process is open as of yesterday?
That's right. Yes, we launched it yesterday. So there's several ways you can apply. You can apply online, or you can drop a form into the local Bank of Ireland in Ashburn, or post it to ourselves. And the details are on the McKeon.ie website and on ashburnheroes.ie.
Super. Okay. Well, and I know from taking a quick look at the website that there are some great prizes involved. You're shortlisting 10 finalists, but I know the top prize is a €1,500 voucher for a hotel stay in Ireland.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And lots of prizes in between.
That's it.
Okay, Cliona, it's an amazing initiative, and I think it's a really timely initiative. And look, the whole theme of our show today is about the industry giving back. So it's amazing to see this, CSR, this corporate social responsibility in action, particularly as part of the community. So congratulations again to all of McKeon Group on achieving 70 years in the industry. It is an absolutely massive achievement, and you've picked a really remarkable way to celebrate it. So that was director at McKeon Group and judge in the Ashburn Heroes initiative, Cliona Molloy. So again, thank you for joining us, Cliona. And I would encourage anybody to take a look at ashburnheroes.ie. And if you're living in the area, or you know somebody living in the area and you feel that, they have been doing some work that maybe goes a little bit under the radar, certainly I recommend a nomination. So we need to take another quick break and we'll be back shortly.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
Hello and welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM. So as we started out by saying at the top of the show, it has been a particularly busy September, and we certainly didn't expect it to be this year due to ongoing COVID-19 restrictions. However, it has certainly surpassed expectations in terms of the number of traditional events that would normally take place in function rooms all around the country. They've all transitioned online, which is great to see. So I just wanted to take a few moments out to go through some of the events that have happened, some of the key insights, and indeed just really to look ahead at a couple of events that are coming up over the next week or so. But before I start, I just wanted to bring a news item to your attention that came out this week, and that is more than 30 people queued overnight to secure a property in Carlow. So on Dublin Street in Carlow, more than 30 people, prospective buyers, queued outside the estate agents in order to secure a property in Carlow. So it is quite shocking that we're back to this again. It's something that the industry really needs to handle better, and estate agents need to know that you can't have 30 people queuing overnight for a property. There's better systems in place, there's technology in place, and it is detrimental to the industry to see news stories like this coming out. So I would really urge any estate agency that finds themselves in this situation maybe to look at technology that can be used maybe to deal with and process property applications in a different way. So in terms of events this year or this month, September started off by Jess Kelly in Newstalk actually launched a 6-part series called Embedded and Tech in Town. So this was a piece sponsored by Salesforce, and it was looking at the impact of technology companies, particularly Silicon Valley technology companies coming into Ireland, setting up in the Silicon Docks, and the impact that has on the town. Now, Jess Kelly, she actually took a really interesting approach here by looking at the evolution of the Docklands over the last 20 or 30 years. So the podcast is available. Again, it's called Embedded Tech in Town. And I recommend it's on the Newstalk website. Go back and take a look at that series or have a listen in. It's a really interesting one. Also, from an iProperty Radio perspective, we finally got to sit down and have a chat with a well-known property developer, Paddy Kelly, to talk about some of the lesser-known aspects of his 60 years in the industry. Look, we had a wonderful chat. Unfortunately, we couldn't capture all of it on video and audio. However, there is a video series. There's about 3 videos available on the iProperty Radio YouTube channel. So I definitely recommend, if you have an interest in knowing any secrets that happen in the industry over the last 60 years, take a listen in. The videos are quite interesting. Again, we couldn't capture everything, but we're not finished yet, because after the restrictions in Dublin are lifted, we will be continuing the discussion with Paddy Kelly, also to see what, through Red Quartz, what the future plans are. There's some interesting things planned, so we're definitely going to continue that conversation. Also, Host in Ireland, the collaborative body for the data sector here in Ireland, or the data centre sector here in Ireland, they hosted a really informative webinar to discuss the digitalisation, energy and climate change. Now that's again so topical at the moment, and it's one of the best insights I got into maybe the true carbon use, actual realistic steps that can be taken towards achieving carbon neutral over the next decade. There was a lot of interesting insights there. If you have an interest in which we all will need to have, I recommend go back and listen if that facility is there. Again, that's Host in Ireland, and it was centred on the data centre sector. However, there was a lot of information there that could really be applied right across the real estate sector. So definitely worth listening in. Also, the Irish Planning Conference took place earlier this month, and there was a whole range of speakers from the Western Development Commission, the Office of the Planning Regulators, the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly, and of course on board Planola. It was the Office of Planning Regulator, and that was again an interesting one because we know that there's a lot of changes have happened, and what I was particularly interested here would there be any changes in terms of public consultation, and maybe the taking that online from a statutory point of view. I didn't really see anything to that. Also, last week was indeed Pensions Awareness Week 2020, and there was a whole day of events just to inform people on the benefits of purchasing property through their pension and the various options available. So I recommend, if you've an interest in this, just go to the Pensions This Week website, and there's a playback option on a number of those events. Now, actually, an interesting one for us earlier this week, late last week now, Women in Proptech, which is a global organisation, Proptech Ireland, and I specifically had the great joy of hosting the Ireland edition Zoom chat. Now, this is an important one because it gives really the Irish industry a voice internationally. So we were able to, talk about the changes, the impact of the pandemic on real estate here, and maybe some of the likely expectations. So I was delighted to be joined by Deirdre Costello and Rita Carney of JLL. Also, Nellie Reid of Meehan Green joined us. And Nellie did rightly remind us that last week actually was Global Green Building Week. So we got to discuss maybe, some of the impacts of the pandemic on energy consumption and how that is perhaps incompatible with sustainability agenda, yet it is necessary, and maybe ways that we can control that somewhat or reduce it somewhat. So it was an interesting, albeit slightly premature conversation. However, it was interesting to know some of the technologies that could be employed actually for greater sustainability. So that's something we're definitely going to revisit on the show here. Now, tomorrow, Wednesday the 30th, there's actually 3 events kicking off. So BizNow, the global and particularly UK company, are hosting a build to rent panel about the Dublin market. So that promises to be an interesting one. Also, the Land Development Agency is hosting an online event, a design review of Colbert Station. Now, Colbert Station is one that we've written about and talked about quite a bit in the past. It's a really interesting and ambitious project for Limerick. So I haven't been to this type of event before, a design review, but I'm looking forward to it. So if anybody is around, the Land Development Agency details are on their website, and that kicks off tomorrow at, I think, about 5:30, but double check the time on the website. Also, the Real Estate Future Proof Conference kicks off tomorrow. That's a global online conference, and the tickets are free and are still available. If you have a quick Google of Real Estate Future Proof, you should be able to get all the information in there. As Frank mentioned, Architecture at the Edge kicks off this Friday, both on and offline. It's definitely worth heading to architectureattheedge.com just to get a full lineup of the events. And finally, a CRE Tech, which is commercial real estate tech. So the CRE Tech Sustainability Summit kicks off this month. Now, there's a couple of different phases here. So the US perspective takes place on the 1st of October, but the European perspective takes place on the 7th and 8th of October. So again, that promises to be an interesting one and very relevant and topical at the moment. So you'll find that at CREtech.com, and it's the Sustainability Summit. So look, I think that's it for us for today and for this week. As mentioned, it's been a particularly busy month. Next month there aren't quite as many events scheduled, but I will try my best to notify you of any that I think might be of interest, particularly now that global events have become so accessible as they're taking place online. So that's it from us today. Thank you for listening into Property Matters on Dublin South FM. Get in touch with the show on social media at iProperty Radio or email hello@ipropertyradio.com. Also, my thanks to Peter Rice on sound and show producer Katie Talon of Hear Me Roar Media. We're back at the same time next week. From myself, Carol Talon, stay safe.